people are very fickle. They want to see something that really draws them in visually. So how can we get amazing CGIs? Have we got kitchen units or tiles that they can touch and feel if the house isn't finished?
A lot of people think of agents in a sort of boiler room environment, pick up the phone and saying, are you interested in buying a property? What does being active as a, well, you're talking from the agent's perspective, what does being active as an agent look like? Hello, my name is Alex Harrington-Griffin. I'm your host of the Real Developer podcast, powered by the creators of Land Insight and Land Fund, the market-leading LandTech. In episode 6, we started to talk about preparing to sell new homes in 2024. It's been a difficult market. Developers need to be ready for next year. Mitchell English of accredited real developer Stratstone Group joined me as my co-host to speak to Charlotte Moxon, Strutt & Parker's head of regional new homes. Together, we discuss everything from the gaps in supply at the moment to using social media to sell new homes, why open days are back, and why bad CGIs can really upset your agent and your buyer. On that note, let's get on with the show. Welcome back to the Real Developer podcast. My name is Alex Harrington-Griffin. This is take 5 of trying to get this intro together. So I'm going to try and focus to make sure we can introduce our guest and my co-host properly. We are back for episode 6 of series 3. This episode is going to cover off a very important topic, preparing to sell new homes in 2024. I am joined by my very cool co-host, Mitchell English from Stratstone Group, real developer, accredited now for 2023. And we are welcoming back Charlotte Moxon, head of regional new homes for Strutt & Parker, who is also very cool, as we established in the previous piece as well. So now we're going to make things our life easy. Let's get stuck into some questions as well that we have prepared better for as well. But thanks for making the intro very enjoyable and humorous for me, at least. Charlotte, in your position, you get to have a conversation on a daily basis that a lot of developers need to be thinking about. And that is, there's been such a drive for consented schemes. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of product that at the moment is not moving as quickly as a lot of developers would like. What is the crux of the conversations you're having with your clients at the moment in terms of those that are getting ready to market schemes for 2024? And what do you think in terms of maybe where some of the gaps are? What will it tell us? Well, let's do it in 2 parts. So the first part is, what is the crux of the conversation with your developer clients right now?
I think most developer clients who are preparing to launch for 2024, there's very little that they can change in terms of specification or product or design at the moment. So it's very much about the marketing. So let's get a solid marketing plan in place. Let's know exactly who the demographic is. Let's know how we are targeting them so that we're going into next year with a really fresh approach, thinking outside the box on some of these things. You can't just stick a property onto a portal these days and hope for a barrage of calls. It's an active marketing input from your agent. So it's making sure that we're prepared and we're ready to rock and roll for next year, really. When it's a little bit quieter in the market and there's still plenty to do, in the current market, you can't just put it onto portals and expect to have a whole barrage of incoming activity. It's very much about being a proactive agent at the moment. And therefore, when we're speaking to our clients, it's very much a partnership. So what are they doing? What are we doing? How can we combine that to get the best results at the end for the development? So the highest sale figures and the quickest sale timescales.
Well said. What do you think that's going to tell us? Actually, just one thing I want to touch on. You talk about the active piece. Mm-hmm. I think for the active piece, a lot of people think of agents in a sort of boiler room environment, pick up the phone and saying, are you interested in buying a property? What does being active as a, well, you're talking from the agent's perspective, what does being active as an agent look like? Is it about, targeted campaigns on social media? I know we're going to touch on that at some point, but what does active mean to you?
I think it goes all the way back. I think it goes back to when a developer first comes to us and says, I'm looking at a site. Because if you're involving an agent at that point, like you would involve your architect, your planning consultant, whoever else it might be, if you've not got sales and marketing in-house, you need a professional that can do that for you. Otherwise, you're falling down when you've got everything else right to then actually sell the units. So it goes back to that point, and we very much see this, as I said, as a partnership with developers. It's working together. It's making sure that from day one, we're all aiming to get the best out of this site together, really. And that goes into the sales period. Obviously, it's having a sales and marketing plan that is fully agreed by the developer and by the agent. We all know what we're doing on a weekly basis. And yes, it is very much picking up the phone at the moment and getting those people through the door. As I said, you can't put property on Rightmove and hope to sell it from that. It's not that kind of environment at the moment. It's not that kind of market. So it is thinking outside the box, coming up with different ideas and just getting off your seat and doing your job properly at the moment.
So it is literally going back into
old school agency,
potentially, and picking up the phone and making those calls and encouraging someone to come and see a new development or a product because you think that it will be, to their liking as well. I mean, that obviously does take it back to old school as well.
Mm-hmm.
You obviously need some very good marketing material to get people to make that move because, we were talking in the last episode about people's expectations. They expect it to be, if they're going to get a call and they're going to make the effort to go and, people are flaky post-COVID. I know a lot of my friends, really have to be convinced to go and do anything. It probably says a lot about me, but more in terms of looking at new homes. But getting people to actually go and visit a product when they're considering interest rates, when they're considering affordability, when they're considering, am I going to be able to sell my existing property for the best price? You really have got to do a lot of work to get someone there. Is there any themes in terms of how your agents do that? And obviously we're not expecting your secret sauce, but
I'm not going to give away our secret sauce. You'll have to come and speak to us for that. I think, again, it goes back to working with the developer prior to his 10 houses that we need to launch. Off you go. It's about going back to actually we need great marketing material these days. People are very fickle. They want to see something that really draws them in visually. So how can we get amazing CGIs? Have we got kitchen units or tiles that they can touch and feel if the house isn't finished? All of these little bits and pieces so that when they're walking in, they're going, wow, I get it. Whereas for a lot of new build properties, unless it's a show home, which is obviously a completely different kettle of fish, they become very different to visualise. And we've certainly seen probably over the last 5 years, even just before COVID, that visualisation from buyers had diminished. So they weren't walking into a building site with hard hats on and going, I can imagine exactly where my Christmas tree is going to be. It was, they don't get it unless they're viewing a show home. So we're working with developers. If we can get a show home, great. That's the sort of pinnacle for any sales agent, isn't it? To have a finished unit to walk into. But if we can't have that for any reason, and there's many reasons that will be the case, what can we do to build that sales toolbox for us as agents and for you as a developer to make sure we've got as many tools there to be able to sell to clients? So as much to touch and feel and explain to them, and have they got a showroom for the kitchens they can go to? Can they have an involvement in the colour of the kitchen? All of that sort of thing, so that it's really bringing it to life. People, I think it's very easy in the new homes industry to forget about the emotional aspect. We're agents, we work with developers all the time. It's a business relationship. And sometimes it is very difficult when you're looking at plans and you're looking at spreadsheets to forget that, or it's very easy to forget that this is somebody's home and this is how they're going to buy into this emotionally as well. So it is walking in and where's their furniture going to go and are they going to bring their children up here, et cetera, et cetera. So it's trying to do as much as we can to work with our buyers, knowing what they want and being able to translate that into the sales and marketing strategy that we produce for a developer.
And touching on that as well, if you're not able to provide a show home, we've explored virtual reality and the items like that give people the presence and feel like they're in that space. It's important, isn't it?
It's really important. And we've quite often done that where we've got finished units but empty rooms. If you're particularly online, if you're looking at an empty room, you pretty much scroll past it. You're going to look at the front shot. The kitchen shot always looks fantastic, and maybe a garden shot, but a lounge and a bedroom, they all tend to look the same. Whereas if we can virtually dress them, which is a really cost-effective way to do it, you don't have to spend 20 or 100 or 200,000 pounds on a show house, whatever you might be. You can do this for under £100 per room. You can put it in, and then it enables us, whatever I do when I'm doing a viewing, when we have those, is print them off on A3. And I reuse the paper afterwards for anyone worried about sustainability. But use them so that we can walk into a room and explain to buyers, this is where your furniture is going to be positioned. This is what your home can look like. How is your furniture going to fit in here? So it just brings it all to life for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You spoke about demand and ultimately a slow market. What are you seeing is the biggest gap in terms of supply and demand with housing type or product or desirability of product?
I think it's important to remember that at the moment, this time this year compared to last year, demand as a whole is down about 16% and supply is up about 2.6%. So we've got more houses than buyers at the moment. Having said that, on a very macro level, the country as a whole has got a massive housing shortage. So there's still buyers out there. And the key things for a buyer will always be price and location. And the house comes very quickly behind that. So at the moment, we're seeing there's a lack of good quality family housing. There's a lot of rubbish out there that's quite highly priced. And we need to make sure that we're seeing to the market good quality housing. Hence the reason we like to work with developers as early in the process as possible, making sure we're getting the right designs, the right specification for the market, and then looking at the pricing as well. There's no point putting a development to market at the moment when you're 10 or 20% above everything else in the area, because it's going to sit there. So that comes in with part of the sales and marketing strategy, that it's getting that pricing right. And we do understand every developer wants to push the prices as much as possible. And we want that. At the end of the day, the more we sell these houses for, the more we earn. I think a lot of people forget that estate agents don't get paid until these houses are sold. It is our sole aim to get these houses sold. But it's finding that balance for developers that we understand in most cases there's finance costs behind this. So how can we make sure the houses are selling in the quickest time possible at the best possible prices? Because at some point it's going to switch between what it's worth to sell and hold out for and your finance costs starting to creep up.
Absolutely.
So again, going back, I would say in one line, good quality family housing is where we're seeing a massive gap at the moment.
Interesting. So you've talked about how agents can add value. What do you think the two most important things that a developer can get out of having an agent partner in moving forward into 2024?
I'm probably going to be a little bit repetitive here because it's probably engaging us as early as possible.
Yep.
So we like to work with developers from, as I said, when you're looking at the site to start off with, because if you're coming to us and saying, I've got a site and I'm planning on putting 12 apartments on here, and we're saying, well, this is a family area. Do we need to look at housing scheme rather than apartment scheme? Or is the mix slightly wrong on there? Have we gone all for 2-bedroom houses when actually, and we understand again that the planning, will play a part in this, but us giving you as much market research and advice as possible early on ends up with us having the product that is best to sell at the end. So that's really key for us. We're very much involved with our developers in terms of coming to pick kitchens, bathrooms, paint colours, all of that kind of thing as well. The number of floor plans I scribble over, there's nothing worse than seeing an architect's floor plan where it's been done to pass planning rather than being thought about as how somebody's going to live in that home. Exactly. Yeah. So it's all added value from from an agent. And I think the key to that is engaging as early as possible. The second one is remembering it's a partnership. Yes, an agent is there working for you as a developer and is being paid by you. But if a developer is working against us, it never ends up with the results that either party would like. If it's very much a partnership, everybody benefits there. The houses sell better, the marketing's better, the exposure's better for the developer, the agent, and the development. So it just all works in a far more positive manner if there's that partnership coming in from day one rather than, we're on different sides of the table or anything.
Solid advice.
Thank you.
No, it's nice to hear. I think one of the things that Mitchell will always appreciate is, I suppose the hardest thing is always trying to find a professional team, or once you've found them, you want to stick with them. But those that can really put themselves in your shoes, and to hear you talking about, the sales program that reflects on the finance costs. I mean, it sounds obvious, but it's probably not something that maybe some professional partners or new homes representatives always think about. They're thinking about maybe some of the more flashy things or just focusing on the pricing, but it is the whole schedule when you're releasing deposit, when you're releasing, when the first exchanges happen in line with, bank funding setups. It's very positive to hear people, new homes representatives like yourself, to kind of think about that developer's journey and the things that they need as well. In terms of buyer groups, and we did talk about this a little bit in the previous episode, I think one of the things we can recognize is that there is a lot of constraints around first-time buyers. I know a couple of people who are looking to buy their first home, and I think whilst the emotional ambition is there, maybe the bank and mum and dad, who are bringing a bit more of a rational / we worked very hard to build this deposit, are sort of saying, well, now is not the right time, or we should be really choosing the time we do go and buy, make sure the pricing stacks up properly. What are you seeing in terms of the buyer inquiries, not necessarily what's moving at the moment, but in terms of buyer inquiries, what are the most active groups, and what is showing some maybe some signs of positivity, whether it's, first timers, downsizers, overseas buyers, that kind of thing?
So I think each of the different buyer groups have got different motivations, and that will therefore impact the times of year that they're inquiring, the types of properties that they're looking at, et cetera, et cetera. So for first-time buyers, we have to remember that they are getting older. So our average first-time buyer now is about 34, has got around about a £60,000 deposit. Now that age has got older, I think mainly because they've been in rented accommodation. Rentals have gone up massively. I mean, our research team were telling me yesterday that for every property on the market, there's about 25 rental inquiries at the moment. So you can see the demand for rentals has gone absolutely through the roof. So it makes it very difficult for first-time buyers. They are still coming through. We have seen since the end of Help to Buy, obviously that impacted the apartment market and the first-time buyer market quite substantially. Whether that will be replaced with anything at any point, who knows? There's been talk about different schemes or bringing it back. We'll have to wait and see on that. First-time buyers and upsizers, it is very important to remember that they are, particularly for the upsizers, it is beneficial to move in a slowing market because they will be, if they have a 10% price decrease on their own property, the 10% price decrease on the property they're buying is going to be far more in pounds and pence. So it's not a bad time to move for those second, third time movers who are looking for more space. For downsizers, though, their aim is to get the most equity out of their properties generally, whether that's for change of lifestyle, making their financial situation easier. And we're seeing this come around in a circle that a lot of them are then looking for to release funds to assist their first-time buyer children. Again, the downsizer market, average age now about 60. So it's not that really young and really old market that we've seen traditionally. In terms of the inquiries that are coming in, it really does depend on the properties that are on the market. We're not seeing people register like they used to and phoning up saying, I'm looking for a property, and when you've got one, let me know, because there's so much information out there. It's only when you make that initial contact because they're calling in about a certain development that you can then say, okay, what have we got? How are we going to sell you a property? And we were talking about this earlier in the week in the office, actually. I think so often agents, particularly if they haven't been through a tough market before, look at a buyer coming in and maybe focus more on the house. I've got this house. How am I going to sell that house specifically? But if we switch it round slightly, if you've got a buyer that's coming in that is an active buyer in the market, you need to cling on to them. So we've got that buyer. What house are we going to sell them? Turn it round the other way. And I think it doesn't necessarily matter about the type of inquiry that's coming in. If you've got a hot buyer, you sell them anything you've got.
Yeah. I guess touching back on the downsizers, there's a school of thought that not everyone has felt the effects of the base rate increases yet. You know, depending on how long people are fixed in for, we're going to see, more and more people feel them effects. You might see the downsizer market move in that regard,
Yeah, I think so. I think Q4 this year is set to have the highest impact of remortgages thus far since the base rate has changed. So it'll be really interesting to see how that impacts at the beginning of next year, potentially for second-hand instructions. So if people suddenly realise that their mortgages are going up massively, are they just going to reconsider what they're doing and how they're doing it? Actually, we don't need 4 or 5 bedrooms anymore. There's only 2 of us, et cetera, et cetera. So it'll be really interesting to see how the next year goes. I don't think there's any agent or developer out there who is looking at 2024 as a really easy year. It is going to be tough, but it's having the right product at the right price with the right agent that's going to make the difference, I think, in 24.
Absolutely. And leading on to that, what sales and marketing strategy would you say is the most important in 2024? You might find developers have got unsold stock currently on their portfolio, on their books, and there'll be a lot out there that are looking at different strategies to try and shift them on now.
I think number one is have a strategy. There's so many developers I speak to, if they approach us and they've been on with another agent for a while and they're going, it's not selling. Well, what are you doing? And they don't really know. And that's not a criticism of the developers at all, because that is the responsibility of the sales and marketing agent to have a strategy in place that is discussed with the developer on a regular basis so that everybody's abreast of the situation. So number one is definitely have a sales and marketing strategy. make sure you know what you're doing and do the basics right. As I've said before, it's not just sticking a property on Rightmove or any other portal and hoping for the best. And it's being flexible and adaptable to the changing market, because things are going up and down on a monthly basis. As we were talking about earlier, that I think Nationwide have reported 0.9% increase for October in house prices. I don't think any of us particularly expected to see that. But again, it's going through. We're not in a seasonal market particularly anymore post-COVID. It's about being able to react to what's happening in the market to sell those houses. I think in terms of the strategy, there's a couple of key bits above and beyond the traditional sales and marketing strategy that are becoming more and more important. So your digital marketing and your content is becoming more important, I think, every year that goes by. How are you represented online? Do you have your own website as a developer? How does that link to the agent's website? And again, it's that collaboration. There's no point a developer doing a social media campaign and an agent doing one that completely contradicts. You need to look at what money is set aside for the sales and marketing budget and use that in the best possible way. Very much make sure that any of the decisions that are being made from data. If we're looking at, I had a development a couple of years ago where it was a block of 12 luxury apartments in a beautiful part of the country. And the developer kept saying, I really want to advertise in this particular place. And we looked at the 6 buyers that had already bought there, and none of them came from that place. They all came from a completely different part of the country that we would have never anticipated. But if they're all coming from one place, you've got to do something with that data. There's no point going, well, it seems like Southampton's a great place to put a board up about it. You've got to use the data that's available from buyers and from previous developments to educate you on your decision making. I think people can be quite rash to make decisions when things aren't going right. And every penny you spend is a penny you can't spend on something right, I always think. And going back to what we mentioned, I think in the last episode, going back to visual aids, it might be at the beginning of this one actually, visual aids. So making sure your CGIs are fantastic. There's nothing more disappointing than CGIs landing in my inbox and you think, oh no, a developer spent a fortune. Developer spent a fortune on these and they're really disappointing. They need to be exciting. You need to look at them as a developer and think, if I saw that house, I'd buy it. Because put yourself in the shoes of any buyer. We've all been there buying our own houses. You want to fall in love with the house that you're purchasing. So any of the visual aids we can get, CGIs, videos are becoming more and more important, as we talked about, the virtual dressing, anything that can spark people's interest. Descriptions, and particularly wordy descriptions, are becoming less and less relevant. I think it's still important in some capacity because you might have a buyer who doesn't know anything about the location, or we might have some really exciting sustainability features that we want to put in there that you can't sort of carry that message with images. But generally, it's making sure the visual aids are top notch, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I guess besides just dropping the price, pricing strategies like stamp duty contributions or stamp duty free, there's always potential for that, I guess, in a slow market, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, price reductions are always a last resort, really. Developers don't like doing it. And I think if an agent is calling you saying you need to drop your price and they've not done anything else, there's other things that they could be looking at prior to that. What does it look like online? Are you getting the views but then not the click-throughs? Because then there's something wrong with that. How's it looking once it's online? What are your images looking like? What's your social media looking like? And it goes on and on and on. But it just isn't as easy as dropping the price. We have done a couple this year actually that have worked quite well. So open days are back. Interestingly, we had one open day where everybody that had booked in didn't turn up, and everybody who hadn't booked in did turn up. So we've got 3 houses down in the south of England. They'd been on with another agent for a while. We tried this and got 2 sold on the open day, just from people who had seen subliminal messages in places and hadn't picked up the phone to say, I want to go and formally view that, but called in. They were in proceedable positions and ready to go. So things like that, I think a lot of people have written off over the last few years. We're trying to bring that back a bit. We've done contributions to mortgage, so £500 a month for a year. Actually, in reality, that works as a £6,000 cash back on completion. But for a buyer, knowing that their mortgage is going to be £500 less a month is a huge thing. And for a developer, I think you'd much prefer to give a £6,000 contribution than have an offer £25,000 under your asking price or something. And again, stamp duty is always a big thing, isn't it? Yeah. That's cash that people have got to come up with as opposed to being able to put on their mortgage. So there's lots of things you can do to think outside the box. And some of it will involve cash incentives from developers. But we tend to find that is a lower level than if you're just slashing the prices. I mean, as we all know, you need to realistically be at the moment between 5 and 10% reducing your prices to have any impact. There's no point doing it if it's that 1, 2, 3%. So it just gives alternatives. It's thinking outside the box rather than just going straight for the price, which is the easy option.
I like that a lot. Charlotte, just as a sort of one brand option, I appreciate there's many different social media platforms out there. What's the one that's sort of the biggest surprise for you that's performing at the moment?
Instagram. Is that the really obvious answer though?
I don't know.
I think generally Instagram has been a younger platform, but we are seeing that really change. The growth that we've seen on our Instagram for Strutt & Parker and BNP over the last couple of years has been massive. And it's not just the followers, it's the engagement that happens with that as well, which I think is so important. And a lot of it, I don't think we're at that place yet where you put a property on social media and somebody's going to call you and say, here's my offer for that property. Yeah. But it's brand awareness for the developer, it's brand awareness for the agent, and it's awareness for the development. And with so much that you can do on Instagram with the targeted ads, which then link through to Facebook anyway, so you're still capturing those markets. I don't understand Twitter, so I'm off that. And obviously LinkedIn is very professional. There are other platforms available though. With the Instagram ads you can do, they can be so targeted these days that it sort of doesn't matter who is following you on Instagram, you can still access them, which is such a great thing to be able to do. But I think what's really important is you're not expecting to put a social media post up and get a massive increase in traffic from that. It's having a continual social media campaign that works alongside or within your sales and marketing campaign to make sure that it's a drip feed and it becomes subliminal messages at the beginning.
Exactly.
But then suddenly it's hold on, I've seen that a couple of times. I'll just check where it is, or I'll have a look at it online, and suddenly they turn up on your doorstep and you've sold them a house. And
I think that's where we see a lot of maybe more traditional, let's say, developers or even business owners. You know, I know plenty of business owners who said, well, I spent a couple of grand doing some social media activity and it didn't sell anything. But I think people have got to recognize it is part of a channel mix. It's part of a list of touch points that are important for sellers nowadays. As any man or woman decides to invest in something, they want numerous trust points, and social media forms one of those because we spend a lot of our time on various social media channels.
Definitely.
Charlotte, I'm just going to, as we move towards the end, we'll jump onto our last final feature, which is the real quick advice for SMEs. And the question that I would like to ask you to round off is, if you had a magic wand right now, what would you change in all developers' mindset ahead of next year?
Negativity.
Good luck.
What have you got for them? Magic wand, remember?
That's it.
Magic wand.
I think that having a positive mindset can do so much good, because it's not going to change the market. It's not going to change the world. But what it does change is the motivation to do something about the situation that you're in. And therefore, if we're working with developers who are really passionate about what they're doing, they're really positive that, okay, perhaps we're not the 20% up on the market appraisal, on the development appraisal we did a couple of years ago, but we're okay, or we know that we can make a success of this in some way, even if it's not looking that positive, you end up with a far better result than a developer who has really gone to ground, refusing to sort of take into account the changing market conditions and just burying their head in the sand. If you are motivated and proactive, we can work with you so well to make a difference when it counts.
Good advice. Happy with that? Good advice piece?
Yeah, I do agree. After being battered through a planning process, a prolonged planning process is quite hard to stay positive. But no, totally agree. I agree.
Think about the perspective.
Yep.
Charlotte, that's all the time we've got time for.
Thank you so
today.
much.
Thank you. And Mitchell, Thank you for being very cool throughout.
It's been an honor.
And we'll see you guys back next time for episode 7. Thank you. Hello everyone, it's your host Alex Harrington-Griffin again, just to say thank you for joining us for this episode. If you liked it, hit the like button, subscribe, and of course, share it with your peers. A big thank you to our partners LandTech for powering this episode. If you want to find out more about their products like Land Insight or Land Fund, go to land.tech or follow LandTech on LinkedIn for SME developer updates, finance updates, and of course the data and research mentioned in this episode. We'll see you back for the next session when we get into some real development conversation. Thank you.